Pennsylvania, the two teams fighting it out this weekend as they do once every 4 years. The Eagles at the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, the Steelers were not dominant in any of their first three games, Peter, and they didn't beat teams that have done really all that much this year. They beat the Giants, who are winless. They beat the Broncos, who have one win over a winless Jets team. They beat the Texans, who are now 0-4 and have fired their coach/GM. How are the Steelers really going to look? I'm curious about this, especially with an unscheduled bye that has left some of the players seemingly a little salty about what happened last week.
Yeah, Mike, you know what is strange about the Steelers? The Steelers came back this year with pretty much their full complement. You know, with Ben Roethlisberger back, with Juju Smith-Schuster and some really good young receivers. I mean, but they've been good on offense, but they haven't been explosive. I mean, if you were to tell me right now, name me one team, I bet there's probably, 8 teams in the NFL so far this year that haven't scored in the 30s yet this year. If you had told me the Pittsburgh Steelers, with Roethlisberger looking like classic Big Ben health-wise, we're going to be one of those teams that, their highest point total so far is 28. It just sounds weird. When everybody else is scoring at a record clip, it just sounds weird to me. So I really like the Steelers. I think the Steelers have a chance to be there at the end and to fight and scratch and claw the Ravens for the division title, which was kind of far-fetched a month ago. But I really like their defense, and I like their defense because it doesn't rely on one weapon. Bud Dupree, the huge star in the first week against the Giants. Since then, clearly, Hayward and Watt have both been at times dominant, especially TJ Watt. So I really like the Steelers to get better as the year goes on. Hopefully for them, okay, they get 16 games out of Big Ben. Because if they don't, then they're just a member of the pack.
And I wonder how much they benefited from the unscheduled bye to the extent that they practiced all week. It's kind of like a little reconvening of training camp. Right now, they didn't know they were preparing for the Titans, but still, you're practicing, you're in your routine, you're getting more reps in for a team that didn't have preseason games, for a team that's working Ben Roethlisberger back into the mix, and that really hasn't clicked. I mean, they could have lost to the Giants. They could have lost to the Broncos. They could have lost to the Texans. They have not been that team that we thought they'd be from the standpoint of winning games easily against bad teams. And let's face it, they faced 3 bad teams. This is their opportunity to really show that they can dominate because the Eagles clearly not one of the better teams in the NFL. They're feeling good about themselves after beating the 49ers on Sunday night. But, that offense for Pittsburgh, we need to see more. And defensively, Peter, let's flip it over to the Eagles now. Carson Wentz running a lot this year. Carson Wentz throwing caution to the wind. The one team you don't want to do that against is the Pittsburgh Steelers because they will come and they will get you.
Here's the thing about the Steelers, too. If you look at their schedule, who would have ever thought in the first 6 weeks of the season that their toughest game would be the Cleveland Browns? But that's who they face next week. They have a really, really interesting stretch after they play Philly. Cleveland, Tennessee, Baltimore. And that to me is really going to tell the tale of this team. By the midpoint of this season, we're going to know everything we need to know about the Steelers. Then it's going to be all about Ben Roethlisberger's health.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And isn't it odd to think that the Steelers and the Browns is a big game? I mean, Steelers fans are accustomed
it's going to be a huge game.
decades of peering down their noses at the Browns. But when you look at the all-time series, 76-59-1. Now, it goes back years. It goes back years before the Steelers were ever any good. I'm guessing over the past 50 years, the wins have favored the Steelers. But the Steelers fans just look at the Browns as it's a tune-up game. Man, and now twice this year they're going to have to be dealing with a Browns team that could beat them, both in Pittsburgh and in Cleveland if it comes down to it. So, important game this weekend for the Steelers to get back on the field, get on the right track, and get a win that isn't, one score, feels like it could have gone either way, because they're going to be playing some good teams soon, starting with, and it's hard to articulate these words, the very good Cleveland Browns. All right, speaking of the Browns, 3-1, hosting the Colts, 3-1. And the Colts are very good. The Colts playing defense arguably better than anyone else. I watched that Colts-Bears game, how they stymied the Chicago offense the entire game. They had 3 points until the final minute, Chicago did. Look, I think both teams can make the playoffs. Do you see either of these teams as a team that could go toe-to-toe with the best teams in the conference?
I don't yet, but, Mike, it's October 9th. You're not the same team on December 9th as you are on October 9th. So, you develop your team. Phillip Rivers developing a rapport with a bunch of new guys that until, 2 months ago, he never played with before. So, and never practiced with before, quite honestly. So, let's see how that develops. And you've noticed one thing about the Colts that I think is really interesting. So, Chris Ballard, as a roster builder, is always going to flood his roster with defensive linemen. It's his position. Andy Reid loves the offensive lineman. Chris Ballard loves the defensive lineman. And I think when you see DeForest Buckner still sort of getting used to this scheme, and you see Matt Eberflus, the defensive coordinator, getting used to how to plug people in to new spots, all sort of centered around the orbit. The same way the Seahawks center around Bobby Wagner, the Indianapolis Colts, their orbit revolves around, obviously, Darius Leonard. They've had a great start. In particular, you know what stat right there that is really, really good is the third down percentage. Because today, in today's football, where everything is explosive, and the third down percentage is somewhere in the mid-40s, to have a third down percentage with your team less than 1 in 3 is phenomenal. Matt Eberflus right now, Mike, is really putting out his resume for everybody to see. So don't necessarily just hand out all these head coaching jobs after this season and don't include Matt Eberflus on your interview list.
Speaking of Darius Leonard, the heart and soul of that defense, he did not practice Wednesday or Thursday with a groin injury. He said yesterday he can play even if he doesn't practice at all this week. That may be a signal we're not going to see him practice today, and he probably ends up with that questionable label going into Sunday. They definitely need him, or it becomes a lot harder to win. And the Browns flipping it around. I'm still amazed that Nick Chubb had 43 yards rushing before he injured his knee, and the Browns still had 307 rushing yards. And with the game on the line and 4-minute offense in operation, Kevin Stefanski knew, I got to give it to Odell Beckham Jr., and I expect we're going to see more of that. And Stefanski said after the game, I'm challenging myself to get the ball in his hands earlier, and they're going to need that if they want to have a chance to beat the good teams. And now they've got 2 straight weeks of good teams, Colts and Steelers. We'll learn a lot about the Browns over the next 2 weekends, Peter.
Look, you know what this occurred to me, and I had a good conversation with Stefanski after the game Sunday. I think one of the things that Kevin Stefanski has done is he has looked at his roster, Mike, and he has said, I think mentally he's got it in his head that every week I am getting the ball early, or going to attempt to get the ball early to Odell Beckham Jr. Now, you notice, Mike, he only got 7 touches in that game, and you say, man, they got to give him more touches. But the difference is he got touches early, and he was still in it late when he made that incredible run around Aldon Smith and made that 50-yard touchdown run, which probably was like 98 yards that he actually ran, 50 scrimmage yards, though. There's one other point I would make about these Browns. When Chubb goes out of the game, what happens? Do you see any drop-off at all? No. Mike, they put in a guy named Dearness Johnson, a free agent from Immokalee, Florida, undrafted free agent from South Florida, Immokalee, Florida. If that sounds familiar, that's Edgerrin James's hometown. And he comes in, 13 carries, 95 yards. And the reason why I bring him up is that I think one of the things that this team has done, going back, honestly, not just Andrew Berry, the current GM, but they have been adding quality depth players. Going back to John Dorsey, they've been adding quality depth players to this team that you're now seeing this is bearing fruit. You lose Chubb, you put in Johnson, and you do not miss a beat.
Yeah, and it's a testament to what Kevin Stefanski is doing. It all comes down to getting the ball in the hands of your best players, and it doesn't have to be difficult. If you want to get the ball in Odell Beckham Jr.'s hands, you don't have to force it to him 30 yards down the field. You can get him a screen pass, you can do an end around, you can do the things they did just to get him in that spot where he's got the ball and the other team has to try to catch him, and a lot of times the other team is not successful. All right, Raiders and Chiefs. Chiefs looked flat on Monday night. Maybe that had something to do with Bill Belichick and the Patriots defense. Raiders come to town. Raiders have lost 2 in a row after starting the season 2-0. Is this a bounce back for the Chiefs? Is this going to be one of those the Raiders wish they hadn't shown up type of games?
Mike, I think one of the reasons why I think that opinions get changed so much early in the season is that you just need to see a team play a little bit more. Like, how do you not love the Chiefs? You got to love the Chiefs. They're probably the best team in football. Okay, but 2 times out of 4 games, they have just stumbled around on offense. Against the Chargers, they had to go to overtime against a kid making his first NFL start, and then against the Patriots. Now, ESPN's graphic I thought was wonderful on Monday night when they said that there have been 3 first halves in his career, that Mahomes has been held in check. I think it was either he's been shut out or, he's had no touchdowns. And all 3 have come against the Patriots. So I kind of look at the Chiefs and say, I want to see a little bit more. I want to see them sustain drives a little bit more against defenses. Paul Guenther has done nothing this offseason, I think, except over and over look at the Kansas City Chiefs. This is our biggest competitor. We have got to find a way as a Raider defense to solve Mahomes. And honestly, Mike, who isn't doing that this offseason? So I think I really want to see Patrick Mahomes come out and dominate a team that has a chance to be pretty good, because 2 out of 4 games so far this year, they haven't dominated.
And when you look at their schedule this year, it really sets up for them to have a special season, no matter how good they are or aren't. And maybe they don't get really tested until the postseason. They've got the Week 6 game at Buffalo, which is a real test, obviously, and one of the great games of the week and great games of the year so far. And it's a shame that we won't get to enjoy it standing alone in prime time if it bumps to Sunday. But you look at their schedule beyond that: Broncos, Jets, Panthers, Raiders again. They play the Buccaneers Week 12 in Tampa. That's one that you circle. Broncos, Dolphins, Saints in New Orleans, just circle that one. Out of the next 12 games, there's only 3 that you circle, Peter. And the rest of them, they should win. They should go at 4-0. They should be 13-3 at the very minimum. The question is, what do they do in those 3 games that we would circle? Bills, Bucks, and Saints, all on the road.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.